They called us the perfect family. They saw 19 children, a giant house, and endless smiles on national television. But the truth, perfection was our prison. For 35 years, I lived as a ghost in my own life, a puppet in a multi-million-dollar empire built on secrets, control, and a silence that felt like a heavy blanket. I was the Cinderella who stayed behind while the world watched my family's foundation turn to ash. But today, the cameras are gone. The umbrella of authority has finally collapsed, and for the first time in my life, I am not afraid of the truth. My name is Jana Duggar, and this is the dark reality of the house I finally walked away from. To you, it was just a hit TV show, a fascinating look at a large, happy family. To me, it was a 24-hour performance that never had an off switch. My life began under the umbrella of authority, a term that sounds protective, but felt like a weight crushing my very soul. Before I could even understand what a soul was, mine was being trained to submit. We were raised under the IBLP, the Institute in Basic Life Principles. It wasn't just a religion, it was a manual for total human control. It started in the nursery. I remember the silence of those rooms, the terrifying quiet that shouldn't exist in a house full of babies. We were taught blanket training before we could even speak. Imagine a 6-month-old child placed on a blanket, and the moment their small hand reached for a toy on the floor, they were hit with a switch. This wasn't discipline. It was the systematic breaking of a child's will. We were taught that our parents were the literal voice of God, and to disagree with them, even in our thoughts, was to rebel against the Creator Himself. As the eldest daughter, the burden I carried was absolute. While other girls my age were dreaming of college, first dates, or careers, I was a second mother to a dozen siblings. I didn't have a childhood, I had a jurisdiction. I spent my teenage years in a cycle of diapers, homeschooling, and cooking meals for 20 people, never realizing that I was losing my own youth to sustain my father's vision of a political dynasty. When the TLC cameras arrived, our private prison became a public spectacle. We were told to keep sweet, a rule that became the mask I wore for 30 years. It meant that no matter how exhausted, angry, or heartbroken I was, my face had to reflect a perfect plastic joy. If I looked tired, I was unsubmissive. If I looked sad, I was opening a door to the devil. We weren't allowed to have friends outside our circle. We couldn't listen to music with a beat. And we couldn't even have a private conversation with a friend without a chaperone. We were the most famous family in America, but we were the most isolated people on earth. I was surrounded by 19 siblings, yet I felt like the only person in the world who didn't exist. Secrets have a physical weight. They rot you from the inside out, making every breath feel heavy. In the Arkansas's big house, we were experts at burying the truth. We had to be. In the mid-2000s, the first major crack appeared in our perfect facade, but the world wouldn't hear about it for another decade. When Josh's actions against his own sisters, against us, were discovered, I waited for my father to be our protector. I waited for him to stand up and say, "This ends now." But the umbrella of authority didn't protect the victims. It only protected the brand. I remember the whispered conversations behind closed doors, the feeling that my own trauma was being treated like a PR problem that needed to be managed rather than a wound that needed to be healed. We were told that grace meant silence. We were told that if we spoke up, we would destroy the ministry, the TV show, and the family's mission. This is the cruelest part of the IBLP culture. It makes the victims feel responsible for the predator's survival. For years, I carried that silence like a stone in my chest. I watched Josh be promoted, I watched him get married, and I watched him become a national face for family values while the sisters were left to bleed in the shadows. Then came 2015. when the police reports were finally leaked. I thought, finally, the truth will set us free. But instead of an apology, I was handed a script. I was told what to say to the media to save the show. Watching my parents sit on that couch with Megyn Kelly, explaining away our suffering as just a mistake, was the moment my world shattered. I realized then that to my father, we weren't daughters, we were assets. We were pawns in a political game he was determined to win at any cost. Our pain was an inconvenience to his empire. That house, with its grand staircase and its sprawling kitchen, started to feel like a crime scene. Every corner held a memory of something we weren't allowed to talk about. The man I called Dad started to feel like a stranger, a manager who only cared about his power and his image. The harvest of those secrets was starting, and for the first time, the foundation of the Duggar name began to crumble. I was 30 years old, unmarried, and still under his roof, realizing that the only thing keeping me there was fear. By 2019, the silence in the house had become deafening. The world thought the storm had passed after 2015, but inside those walls, we were living in the eye of a hurricane. Then came that morning in November. I remember the air feeling thick, a strange tension that vibrated through the hallways. When the news broke that federal agents had raided Josh's car lot, the Big Heimels didn't just feel like a prison anymore, it felt like a sinking ship. I watched my father's face as he paced the floor. For the first time in my life, the mask of the unshakable leader was gone. In its place was a man scrambling to control a narrative that was finally out of his hands. This wasn't a family mistake that could be handled with a private prayer meeting or a scripted apology. This was the United States government versus the secrets we had been told to keep. We were told to stay loyal, to stay quiet, and to believe that this was just persecution against our faith. But deep down, in the quiet moments when the cameras were off, the truth was scratching at the door. The trial in 2021 was the longest 10 days of my life. I wasn't just watching a brother on trial. I was watching my entire upbringing being dismantled in a courtroom. I sat through the briefings, and I heard the descriptions of the evidence found on those devices. Evidence so dark and so stomach-turning that it shattered the last remaining pieces of my heart. I looked across the room at my parents, and I saw them still trying to find excuses. They were more worried about the testimony of the family name than the horrific reality of the crimes committed. That courtroom became a battlefield for our souls. For the first time, the older sisters were split. Some felt the pull of the old loyalty, the fear of the umbrella, but others, like Jill and Jinger, had already found the courage to step into the light. Watching the guilty verdict being read felt like an earthquake. As Josh was led away in handcuffs, the empire didn't just fall. It vanished. The TV shows, the politics, the perfect brand, it all died in that moment. I walked out of that building and realized the man I had spent 30 years trying to please was just a man, and the system I had sacrificed my youth for was a lie. I was 31 years old, and for the first time in my life, I realized that if I didn't save myself, no one else would. Leaving Tonatown wasn't an exit, it was an escape. People often asked why I stayed so long. They called me the stay-at-home daughter, as if it were a choice I made freely. What they didn't see was the psychological chains. I stayed because I felt I was the only thing standing between my younger siblings and total chaos. I stayed because I was told that a daughter's place was under her father's protection until a husband was chosen. But after the trial, the protection felt like a chokehold. Then, in the midst of the ruins, I met Stephen. My relationship with Stephen Wistman wasn't the scripted, chaperone courtship the world saw on TLC. For the first time, I was a woman making her own choices at 34, I was finally experiencing what it meant to have a conversation that wasn't monitored, to hold a hand because I wanted to, not because it was permitted. Stephen didn't see me as a Duggar asset, he saw me as Jana. Moving to Nebraska was the first breath of fresh air I had ever taken. I remember driving across the state line and feeling the weight of the Arkansas house literally lifting off my chest. I started doing things I was never allowed to do. I went to nursing school. I wore pants. I cut my hair. And then the wedding. When I walked down that aisle in an off, the shoulder gown, a dress that would have been a sin in my father's house, I wasn't just joining my life with Stevens. I was divorcing my past. Now, as I stand here in 2025, my life looks nothing like the one TLC sold to the world. I am living in a fixer, upper farmhouse, far away from the cameras and the control. And the most beautiful part, I am preparing to become a mother this coming January. As I feel my baby move, I make a silent promise. You will never be blanket trained. You will never be told your voice doesn't matter. You will never have to keep sweet. While your heart is breaking, my child will grow up in the sunlight, not under an umbrella of fear. The cycle of control ends with me. I was the Cinderella who stayed, but I am the woman who finally chose to be free. Money in our family wasn't just a resource, it was a leash. For years, the world assumed that because we were on a hit television show, we were all becoming wealthy. We saw the ratings, we saw the merchandise, and we saw the millions of dollars flowing into the Duggar name. But as the eldest daughter, I saw the truth behind the ledger. We weren't employees, we were volunteers in our father's business. I remember the long days of filming, sometimes 12 to 15 hours a day, only to realize that we didn't have access to a single penny of the earnings. My father controlled the contracts. He signed for us even after we were legal adults. When some of my sisters started to ask questions about where the money was going, the answer was always the same. It's being saved for your future. But that future was a trap. The money was only available if you stayed under his authority. If you followed his rules, you were taken care of. If you dared to speak out or live independently, you were cut off. Watching my sister Jill have to fight, literally sue her own father, just to get a fraction of the money she earned over a decade of filming was a wake-up call for all of us. It wasn't about the money, it was about the power. By keeping us financially dependent, he ensured we could never leave. I spent my 20s living in a mansion, yet I didn't have the funds to buy a car or rent a simple apartment. I was a millionaire on paper and a pauper in reality. Breaking free meant realizing that no amount of family security was worth the price of my independence. In the IBLP, a woman's education is seen as a threat. We were taught that our only career was to be a wife and a mother. Higher education was discouraged because it led to independent thinking. And in my father's house, independent thinking was the beginning of rebellion. I always had a heart for helping people. I watched my sisters give birth, I helped care for the sick in our community, and I felt a deep pull toward the medical field. But for years, that dream was buried. I was told that my place was in the kitchen or the nursery, homeschooling the younger children. I would look at nursing textbooks in secret, wondering what it would be like to have a degree, to have a skill that belonged only to me. It wasn't until I reached my 30s that I finally gathered the courage to say, I want more. Entering nursing school was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done. I felt like a fish out of water. I was sitting in classrooms with people 10 years younger than me, people who had been allowed to think for themselves their whole lives. But every time I mastered a new skill, every time I passed an exam, a piece of the old Jana was replaced by someone stronger. Learning wasn't just about medicine, it was about proving to myself that my brain wasn't just a vessel for my father's doctrines. I was finally building a foundation that he couldn't take away. To an outsider, a pair of jeans or a sleeveless top seems insignificant. But in the world I grew up in, clothing was a spiritual battlefield. Our modesty standards were designed to make us invisible, to ensure that we never drew attention to ourselves and always remained shame-faced and submissive. I remember that Nike code. If we were out in public and a woman walked by wearing something my brothers shouldn't see, someone would whisper, "Nike," and all the boys would look down at their shoes. It placed the burden of men's purity squarely on the shoulders of women. We were taught that if a man had a wrong thought, it was because we hadn't covered ourselves enough. We lived in long denim skirts, even in the sweltering Arkansas heat, fearful that a glimpse of a knee or a shoulder would be a sin. When I started wearing pants for the first time, it felt like I was walking naked down the street. The psychological conditioning was that deep, but it was also the first time I felt like a human being instead of a walking temptation. Choosing my own clothes was my silent rebellion. Every time I put on a dress that showed my shoulders or a pair of jeans that allowed me to move freely, I was shedding the skin of the IBLP. My wedding dress was the final statement, and off the shoulder gown that celebrated my body instead of hiding it in shame. I was finally beautiful on my own terms, not my father's. For 30 years, I didn't know who God was. I only knew who my father said he was. In our house, God was a cosmic version of Jim Bob Duggar, a strict judge who was constantly watching for a mistake, a ruler who demanded total perfection and absolute submission. Faith wasn't a comfort, it was a checklist. When the scandals hit and the empire collapsed, my faith collapsed with it. How could a godly system produce so much pain? How could a godly father allow such darkness to hide under his roof? I had to go through what people call deconstruction. It was a painful, lonely process of taking apart everything I believed and looking at it under the light of truth. I realized that the God of the IBLP was a God of fear, used to keep people in line. I had to walk away from that version of religion to find a Savior who actually loves the broken. I found a God who isn't angry at my questions, a God who doesn't demand that I keep sweet while I'm bleeding. Rediscovering my faith outside of the Arkansas house was like seeing color for the first time. I am still a woman of faith, but my faith is no longer a weapon used against me. It is the peace that allows me to sleep at night in a house where no one is watching my every move. As I sit here in my home in Nebraska, looking out at the snow beginning to fall, I realize that the girl I was in those TLC episodes is officially gone. In just a few weeks, in January 2026, I will hold my first child in my arms. People ask if I'm afraid of being a mother after everything I've been through. My answer is always no, because I know exactly what not to do. My child will never know the weight of a jurisdiction before they know the joy of a playground. They will never have to perform for a camera to earn their parents' love. They will be allowed to cry, to be angry, to dream, and to fail. My motherhood is my final act of defiance against the system that tried to own me. The Arkansas house still stands, but its power is broken. My sisters and I are building lives that our parents never imagined for us. We are nurses, authors, pilots, and most importantly, we are free. If you are watching this and you feel trapped in a world that tells you that your voice doesn't matter, look at me. I stayed until I was 34, and I still made it out. It is never too late to reclaim your life. The sun is finally rising, and for the first time, I am not just surviving, I am alive. Thank you for walking this long and difficult journey with me today. My story is just one of many, and the path to freedom is never traveled alone. If this documentary moved you, or if you believe in the power of breaking the cycle of silence, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. By subscribing, you help us bring more untold stories to light and support a community where the truth is never hidden. I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Have you ever had to find the courage to walk away from a life that wasn't yours? Your stories of strength inspire me every single day. If you want to dive deeper into the reality of the IBLP or see the stories of my sisters who found their own way out, click on the video on your screen right now. I'm Jana, and remember, it is never too late to find your voice. I'll see you in the next video. Stay brave and stay free.